Wind Creek Casino and Hotel and WKRG News 5 present Honor Flight, South Alabama, a special hour.
Mobile Airport at 7 o'clock in the morning.
It's the start of a day that won't soon be forgotten. Once again, a U.S. Airways jetliner loaded with veterans of World War II is taking off from Mobile Regional Airport bound for Washington, D.C. and the World War II Memorial.
Hello, and thanks for joining us as we bring you stories of honor and sacrifice. Through our association with the people who made Honor Flight South Alabama possible, we're listening to the stories of the men and women who make up what's best been described as our greatest generation. When those who were lucky enough to survive came home from the war, they opted to go on with their life, their work, their families. Most didn't talk much about their experiences. Tonight, you'll hear some of those almost lost stories and understand how ordinary men and women saved this country and others in an extraordinary effort that preserved our freedoms. We'll also take you along on the last great mission to bring honor and respect to this special group of people. Honor Flight, South Alabama.
I think it's a great experience I'll have.
I think it's a real fine thing that they're doing for World War II veterans.
I think it's great myself. There's a lot of people that from down here especially, that never been to Washington.
The plane ride from Mobile to Washington is made as easy as possible by Honor Flight volunteers.
And as we prepare to visit the monument that has been built and dedicated in their honor, we join together as a grateful nation to salute their patriotic sense of purpose and their commitment to service and duty.
For the vets, the Honor Flight journey began when they were much younger men and women, caught up in something that affected just about every man, woman, and child in the country, World War II. Over the past several months, we've talked with several veterans who found themselves fighting the Nazi enemy in Europe. They were infantrymen and tank drivers, pilots and prisoners, and everything in between. Jim Holloway and his brother Charles were among them. Jim actually joined the Air Force before the war began and served almost to the end of it. His first overseas deployment was supposed to be in the Pacific.
We left San Francisco the night of December the 6th of 1941. You know what happened in December the 7th.
Jim never made it to the Pacific. After some stateside deployments, he finally made it to Europe, crossing the Atlantic as a radio operator on a B-17. Jim Holloway would find himself dodging Nazi buzz bombs while stationed in England, and he would soon find out that his brother Charles was facing challenges of his own.
We would bomb the rail line. We would go in and fill in the craters.
Charles was ordered to do that by his German captors. He'd been an infantryman in Italy and France before being captured. He was assigned to Stalag 7A in Moosburg, Germany, near Munich. And despite being a prisoner, Charles believes he was fortunate since his captivity came close to the end of the war.
Like I said, I think the older guards knew the time was at an end for them, for the military. So they were very lenient. Like I say, they would allow the civilian women to come in with their bread.
Charles and 110,000 of his fellow prisoners were eventually liberated by the 14th Armored Division, who became known as the Liberators. At about the same time in Germany, a young infantryman, Harry Bennett, found himself in an unusual position as a tank driver with the 7th Armored Division. The division needed tanker replacements, and he volunteered.
Never driven a tank.
Right. How hard can it be?
But I was in the infantry. I said, hell, anything's better than the infantry.
And Bennett faced more challenges. At first, he didn't even know how to get into the Sherman tank he'd be driving. But with a little instruction, and since he'd driven heavy equipment before, Bennett believed he could do it, as long as it was daylight. His unit moved out at 1:45 a.m.
My heart sunk. I gave those fellows a ride they'll never forget, and I know they've prayed. If any of them are still alive, I'd like to meet them.
The division moved out in southern France, headed for Germany. It wasn't long before now veteran tank driver Bennett ran into the infamous Siegfried Line. The Germans built it to deter armored vehicles.
There's places that they have tank traps. The Siegfried Line, they had dragon's teeth, which were cement barriers.
But that's not all. A tank could literally be swallowed up into the ground.
A hole in the ground like the size of a house upside down. Once you're down in them, then you're stuck, see.
Bennett survived the armored spearhead into Germany and returned home, keeping his reserve status and training men for the Korean War.
These veterans are passing, or as I say, they're being promoted at the rate of about 12 to 1,500 a day.
I've got a wonderful feeling, everything's going my way. That's it. All right.
Their arrival at Reagan National Airport is met with cheers, tears, and gratitude. Busy airport travelers stop to pay tribute. There is music, an official military welcome. And there is Patty Pryor. She's met every honor flight in Washington since the program began.
The gentlemen deserve a lot more than what we give them now. And it's in my heart, it's their welcome home, it's their parade, and let them know how much we appreciate them.
Pryor, a veteran herself and a U.S. Airways employee, says she has a fondness for Honor Flight South Alabama. This past year, she traveled to the Gulf Coast for a visit. The Washington native had never been to Alabama before.
There are certain ones that are very special to me, and South Alabama is one of them because of the way they do treat the veterans. The veterans, you know, they all have smiles on their face when they get off that plane. And they're very happy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
For many of the vets, the trip itself is a chance to reconnect with those who understand what the war and the time was all about. When they returned from their duties, many didn't talk about their jobs, some so dangerous an average person just wouldn't understand.
Well, finally ended up with 56 missions.
Charles Christie flew the P-47 Thunderbolt in missions over France. Most of those missions were dive bombing and strafing runs on strategic targets.
Shooting up anything that you could find moving, really. Trains, trucks, tanks, whatever.
Thunderbolt pilots would acquire targets at about 5,000 to 6,000 feet. There was a good reason for that.
That was in between where the rifle shots couldn't reach you and the anti-aircraft was usually above you. So you was kind of in between, so you was pretty safe at that altitude. A lot of times they wouldn't shoot at you coming down. They'd wait till you got started up and then they'd start shooting, and you could see the traces going all around. And you didn't want to fly in a straight line. You wanted to either move one way or another to try to dodge where they were shooting.
World War II combat pilots weren't known for long careers. Just ask Seeker Harris, who flew the B-17 and later the B-24 in bombing runs over Germany.
The B-24 is more maneuverable,
Right.
more powerful, a little faster.
At times, hundreds of these bombers filled the skies as they rendezvoused and headed for their targets over Germany. On his 6th mission, Harris's plane was shot down, somewhere close to Munich. He and his crew bailed out and were captured by the Germans.
After I was first shot down, they put me in room that was completely soundproof.
As an officer, Harris was kept in isolation and interrogated daily. He spent 15 months at Stalag 3 and lost some 69 pounds.
Still to come, you'll hear from men who fought in a pivotal battle deep in the heart of Germany and who witnessed the last days of the Nazi army. Plus, we'll take you along as these veterans arrive at their memorial in Washington.
Oh, I tell you, it's just something that's it's just outstanding.